So we are going to talk something very interesting today, right? So we are going to talk about passwords. And after talking about passwords, we are going to touch upon passwordless. So a brief introduction about me. I manage the identity and access management team for NXP Semiconductors. I'm also the founder, the co-founder, and I lead a community called Cloud Security Alliance Bangalore chapter, and also another nonprofit community called CloudSec Guru. To be the experience or the opinions I'm sharing here is totally on my own. And please connect me with LinkedIn because I'm very active there, and that's the best way to reach me. The next slide is to grab your attention because whenever I speak to students and I speak to people who are entry level to cybersecurity, they always think cybersecurity is all about hacking. So I intentionally keep a slide to show interest that there is something called identity and access management, and there are jobs available. At this time of the recession, there are a good number of jobs. So if you are here, you are in the right session. Now, I will briefly start with some numbers, and these numbers are quite, they're quite worrying, right? So 84% of organization had identity-related breaches last year, right? And we are dealing with humongous number of identities, be it human or machine, right? It's a huge number which we have to deal with. And while we talk about breaches, 61% of these breaches are because of compromised credentials, right? These numbers are scary. But then I'll take a deep down of what these 61% breaches mean, right? And if you look at what these breaches, when I say identity related breaches, what does it mean? Somebody is stealing the credentials, yes, 33%. Somebody is socially engineering the passwords, yes, 27%. Phishing, 60%, close to 60%, right? Compromised privileged identities, right, mostly through passwords again, is 23%. Your passwords are getting brute forced, 23%, right? These are numbers which are happening year on year, and the main culprit here is passwords. So I think it's proven that the malicious users or the bad actors need your password. But then, do you really need them? That's what we are going to talk about now. So I'm going to introduce a topic called passwordless. As the name sounds, it means you are not using passwords anymore. And we are going to just very, very high level talk about the why, what, and how. So we'll start with the why. And I'll go back to the history of why passwords were invented, right? Because we have to understand passwords and the time they were invented. So passwords was around 1960. It was used when there was a single machine, a single server, and you need to log into that server. It was time bound, and you need to save your work in that server. So of course you need a password because there are multiple users using that machine, right? And also, I think if I look at the NIST guidelines of your passwords, right, all of us are very familiar of using maybe a 8-character, a combination of uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special characters, and then the complex a password is, the better it is. And we were kind of told and made aware that you should not use dictionary words. Those were the guidelines passwords are known for, right? But then, are we aware that in 2020, the NIST guidelines is telling you, don't use passwords, but call it passphrases, because passphrases are easy to remember and then are complex enough too, right? And then you don't have to change your passwords often, right? That's what is the guideline telling you, right? And whereas they kind of ask you to use 2FA, we'll talk about it. But then also what is not mentioned here is the digitization, right? Because we no longer use systems which are time bound. We are not longer using shared systems. We have our own devices with us. So can we look at, do we still need the passwords, right? Also, I talked about the problems with the passwords, right? So all of us have used weak passwords, I'm sure, in this group, right? And we know that passwords are vulnerable for brute force attacks. All of us have, tried to use the same username and passwords for many accounts, right? So if one set gets hacked, that means the account can be used everywhere else, right? Phishing, we can fall into phishing traps and give our credentials. With keystrokes, your passwords can be learned too. And of course, man in the middle of attacks, which could even replay your passwords. So there is a huge problem with passwords. So I think I also wanted to introduce MFA because a lot of us will say, oh no, we have passwords, but we have MFA. We should be good. My answer will be yes, but, and the big but is recently there has been attacks where even your MFA token is stolen, right? And there is still attack penetration rate even with MFA, right? And I'm going to show you because most of the session where I go and I talk about MFA, and I say that MFA may not be just enough. There are questions which say why, So I just brought this page where, between the user and the website, there is a malicious user in between and he has a phishing site up, right? Whatever the user is doing is captured by the site and it's interacted with the target website. So the user puts a password, it goes to the phishing site know the passwords now, but in turn, when the target site is asking for MFA, the user enters the MFA, and as if the phishing site is asking, because of the MFA are not rechecking the source from where the request for MFA is being originated, the user input is read by phishing site, and now they have the access to your target website, right? So I call it traditional MFA because I have another way to make it better. We'll talk about it, but then a traditional MFA is just not enough for you. So we see that it can be phished, so we need something different. So your passwords are not going to work, your traditional MFA are not going to work. So what else? And that's where let's talk about the what of passwordless. So I try to keep it very simple so that the principles of authentication is arranged for passwordless in the similar way. Something you know, something you have, and something you are, right? And something you know, instead of a password, we could use a PIN, and I'll explain how a PIN works, and it's different from a password. But something when you have your device, you have your device may have a crypto key, there could be a smart card, there could be a YubiKey device, and something you are is your biometrics, of course, right? Now, the big topic of what is the difference between a PIN and a password, right? And I did tell you that a passwords are the common secret between the user and the server, right? So the user is aware of the password, plus it's being sent to the server too, right? So the server is also made aware of the same password. So when you communicate, the password is validated and both parties know. But the PIN is known to the user, but it's not sent to the server, right? A PIN is attached usually to a device which the user has, right? So the PIN is only known to the user and to his or her device, right? So when you use a PIN, there is always an inherent MFA. So what does MFA means? You use more than two factors for authentication. The factors we talked about is something you are, something you have, and something you know, right? So if there are two, it's called multi-factor. So when you use a PIN, you are also using your device. So you are using something you know, and you are also using something you have, which is your device. So it's an inherent MFA. So a PIN is definitely more secure than your passwords. Now, coming to, because I mentioned PIN as a method for passwordless, let's talk about other methods, right? So the most easy method may be to send an OTP or an email code for you to sign on. May not be that secure. There are a lot of single sign-on methods where your social sign-in passwords can be worked for authentication. So you don't need a password. You can use the same tokens from OAuth to proceed with your authentication request. Plus, we have the whole SAML OpenID concept where your identity provider is the only provider which has your passwords, but then rest of the service provider are not using passwords anymore. They trust the identity provider and use the passwords from there. But the biggest uh, passwordless method is biometrics, right? I think whenever we speak about passwordless, the first thing which comes to us is biometrics. And biometrics has enabled passwordless to a big extent. And of course, the cryptographic certificates in a PKI format, public key and private keys. We'll talk about that in a bit. But then these are methods of how you can make your passwordless work. Also, a big fan of the security of Apple, and then the Apple also introduced a very key feature called PassKey. If you have not heard it, so with your PassKey, you can set your account creation without the need of managing passwords. And your passkeys are synced with your iCloud infrastructure, and you can use your iPhone to sign into your apps and websites without using the passwords anymore. So great. I think this is a great way to get rid of your passwords. But then, how is this possible? Internally, we all use Fido 2, right? And I can't. It's little technical, but then I can't end the session without talking about Fido 2, because it's because of Fido 2 we are able to go passwordless, right? So it's great for security because yeah, it gives you a public and a private key through which when you enter your PIN, the PIN unlocks the private and public key in your device, right? So it's great for security because it's using cryptographic. It's great for convenience because you don't have to remember your passwords. You don't have to deal with passwords. Passwords are bad for user experience too, right? Privacy, because I think this combination is phishing resistance because it's first of all your pins and your keys are part of your device, right? So you need to have your device and your pin to access FIDO2 type of authentication. But then the application which you are accessing, which you are trying to access, is also having a key. So if there is a malicious user who comes in between, he or she will not have that key, which can authenticate you with your PIN and the public and private key combination of your device. So it's great for privacy, and it can scale. It can scale because there is no centralized server to store the keys, right? It's all happening in your own device, right? So a great way, Fido 2, and thanks to the Fido organization for coming up with great solutions. Yeah, that has enabled how do you do, passwordless these days. So, talking about the what, right? So we know passwordless is better for security, and I talked about how Fido 2 is making it more secure. We have an inherent MFA because we don't have a password anymore, brute and force. attacks, stolen credential attacks are not possible now. We are safe from servers. So earlier, passwords being stored in servers could the servers were attacked to get the passwords, right? But now these passwords are the pins and the keys are in your device, right? So the servers are safe and safe from phishing. Like I said, a person cannot be tricked to sign into uh, sorry about that. A person cannot be tricked to sign into a phishing app because the key won't match with that app, right? So great for security. Now the big question arises, and I think we by now we know passwords are bad. We know passwordless is the next big solution, but the big question is how. How do we get it? And I come from personal experience on going through a journey from using passwords to going to passwordless. So the experience which I'm sharing is very, very personal. And I've kind of made it very simple in 5 simple steps, right? So everything, because we are in the GRC stage, we have to start with risk, right? Because everything in IAM needs good money, needs budget, and affects a lot of end users, right? So you need to be sure what you are attempting before you do it, right? So you need to make a good risk assessment and you need to make a business case. A business case is needed because you have to convince your stakeholders on why the need to go to passwordless. Of course, if your first step is done and you got a go ahead from your leadership, stakeholders on moving to a journey of passwordless, then that's when you start evaluating solutions, right? What are the options you have on your table to go passwordless? If your organization is using Active Directory, then maybe the Windows Hello for Business is a great offering for you to opt for. And it uses a PIN based authentication, of course, with a crypto key solution, which is locked in your device and to allows you to get in to your laptop and also single sign on to many other applications. But then big question we have to think is legacy servers, right? Are your legacy servers can manage being for you to go passwordless? I think you have to understand the dependency and you may have to have solutions workarounds for legacy servers. And when you have completed your step 2, I think it's time to do a pilot. And anything in identity and access management cannot go big bang or cannot go global because of the impact it has on the users. So you need to start small. You need to make sure we test the solution enough, especially with the remote working, with work from homes. People may not be able to sign on into their laptops or may not be able to sign on to the application, and there could be a productivity loss. So you really have to plan it well so that people work is not affected. So start with a pilot, test it out. If go green, then it's when you go global. And we talked about from Maria about how important is user awareness, right? So when you go global, you have to tell users what you are going to achieve, how is passwordless better, what is their life look like if they don't deal with passwords anymore, and make sure you spend quality number of time to reiterate the same story again and again so that every single user of your organization understands the requirement, and then plan the global rollout. And of course, the last and the most difficult step is to remove passwords from your identity directory. And the second step, where I talked about legacy servers, you really have to understand when the workaround for your legacy server so that you can eliminate your passwords from identity directory. And this is the most difficult part because we all go passwordless maybe, but then we stop at stage 4. We struggle to eliminate the passwords, but then for you to be passwordless, your passwords have to be removed. So those are 5 quick steps on how you can move to passwordless. And I'm going to summarize in my next slide. Is about passwordless. We know that it's better security. We know that it's frictionless. That means it has a great user experience. We all users have, at least I know from my side, I hate passwords, right? I can't remember it. And I love the fact that I can open my laptops and my phones with my pins and biometrics rather than passwords. And of course, it can be managed at scale. One point I didn't mention is the cost to manage passwords, which your organization have to bear, right? So with passwords comes the help desk cost, which is a very huge budget. With passwords comes the security cost of tracking the passwords and making sure it's not hacked. So it is a very costly affair. And going passwordless is at scale also. And of course, I'm again and again stressing the fact that passwordless have an inherent MFA, and that's what I call as modern MFA, not the traditional, because this MFA is Fido 2. It has a cryptographic combination of keys and better than the traditional ones. So I think I will have some time for Q&A, but then I just want to take everybody to think through our journey to cybersecurity is huge, and our journey to identity and access management is also huge. We know IAM programs are long, but then we just have to take the first step to be passwordless, and that step is now. So yeah, that's about it. I'm happy to take questions.